The most memorable thing from the trip was a sort of dissonance that we experienced racially, clearly, because race in the United States is very different than it is in South Africa, as it is in many other countries. But the South African experience particularly is interesting because
welcome to this new episode. We have Yasmin here. Drum rolls. So Yasmin, I'll allow you to introduce yourself. How do you want us to know you?
Okay, well, hi. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Happy to have been invited. I am Yasmin Greer. I'm a second-year PhD student in Black Studies at Northwestern University. I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland, in the United States, but I've lived in Atlanta. I've lived in a more, I guess you could say, like a county right outside of Denver in Colorado, which was an interesting experience. And I did my undergrad at Howard University, which is a historically Black university in Washington, D.C. So I've been around, learned a lot, met a lot of people, had a lot of different experiences. So I'm excited to talk to you about.
So we found out something we have in common this few minutes ago. And what we found out is that Yasmin went to Howard University.
Yes.
And Nnamdi Azikiwe, the first president of Nigeria, also went to Howard University.
Yeah.
And I'm representing Nigeria right now. So we are kind of representing Howard, both of us.
Very much so. Definitely.
So in describing yourself, you mentioned Baltimore, Maryland, you mentioned Atlanta, you mentioned Denver, now Chicago. That's 4 places.
Yeah. Plus DC, which is where I went to undergrad.
Let's talk about you as a Black woman. That's what we want to discuss in this very session. Yasmin as a Black American woman existing in this our world. It's a beautiful world sometimes. So I want to talk about your experiences traveling. I want to talk about your experiences living in America. I want to talk about your interaction with other people from different races. When I was a kid, thinking of America, you think of place where everything is working. You think of land of the free. You think of place that have more opportunities. You think of all these nice things that were sold to us because we consumed a lot of American media in Nigeria.
Yeah.
And then you live in America, you'd be like, oh, okay. I don't know why I think about this. I don't know why I think about land of the free. I don't know why I think about land of opportunity. I don't know why I think about these realities. And now as a student of history, and as a scholar myself, I get to read, I get to observe, I get to learn about other people's experiences. And in particular, the life of a Black woman has been a life of resilience, has been a life of always overcoming a lot of institutional systemic challenges. And I'm thinking, how is that for a Black woman today? Living in America and existing in the world. But before we go into the nitty-gritty of all those things, let's start with, have you ever been abroad?
I have, yes, just one time. Just one time. So I went to South Africa for 8 weeks in 2023. Prior to that, I had never been out of the country, which I guess is important to discuss, at least in like the context of my family and how and why that is. My parents had gone out of the country. They were born and raised in the United States, but as a family, it just wasn't something that was financially like prioritized to happen. But it's also important to keep in mind that the United States is there's a lot to do here. So this isn't to say that people here don't go abroad. That's not at all what I'm saying. It is to say that I can get a lot of different experiences here. So I just had not yet gone out of the country until 2023, which was when I graduated from Howard. At Howard, we had a 2-year language requirement. I want to say, I don't know if Howard teaches the most African languages in the country or if it's the HBCU that teaches the most. But it's at minimum the HBCU that teaches the most. You can learn Wolof, you can learn Amharic, you can do Zulu, which is what I did. I have friends who took Haitian Creole. So I did Zulu, which was like a popular class to take at the time because everyone was doing your traditional French and Spanish. And I did French for a little bit because that's what I did when I was younger, you know, in high school, but I got bored of it very quickly. So I was like, let me try out this Zulu thing and just see what this is about. So I did Zulu for 4 semesters. And through that program, I applied for and got accepted into the Fulbright Hayes program, which is a version of Fulbright that sends students in the United States to other countries for language immersion. So it's not quite like your typical Fulbright where it's like, I want to teach students in Canada.
Oh, okay.
Fulbright Hayes is Fulbright, but it's a different, you know, like version.
Different version of it. Okay.
Yeah. And it's more condensed. So very interesting experience. The trip it's something that happens annually, hosted by a Zulu professor at UPenn, but students from around the country who had been learning Zulu at different universities and in different stages of their intellectual journeys were accepted into the trip. So there were PhD students, there were students who were like fresh in undergrad and had only done Zulu for maybe 2 semesters or something like that. But about half of us were Howard students. So Black students who went to Howard and were representing a variety of different states and backgrounds. And then we had a student who is getting a PhD here in the US at one of the Ivies. He's actually South African. He's colored is how he identifies in their terms. And he is doing a history PhD. So it was valuable for him to go back to South Africa and do some Zulu immersion there. Because it wasn't his native language. He's not Zulu in South Africa. Because everyone in South Africa is not Zulu. And then just students from other places. So we went over there for 8 weeks. We did a week in like the Joburg area, and then the rest of the trip was in KwaZulu-Natal. So we were in Richards Bay for, I want to say 3 weeks, maybe. And then we were in Durban for another 3 weeks. And the first thing I'll say about that trip, the most eye-opening thing for us as American students in the United States who do learn about other countries, we learn about things that happen abroad in our public school education, but also it's important to note that education at Howard is very diasporic. So I'm taking classes on Pan-Africanism. I'm taking classes on politics in Latin America. Like it's not a solely United States experience. So we know things.
Yes,
you know,
this is unlike many other African colleges.
Yes. We know things. I was reading Steve Biko's essays when I was 17. Like it's not like we don't know things about other countries here. And at the same time, it takes actually experiencing and being in it to realize like, oh, things are different here. So the most memorable thing from the trip was a sort of dissonance that we experienced racially, clearly, because race in the United States is very different than it is in South Africa, as it is in many other countries. But the South African experience particularly is interesting because of the history of apartheid there and just the different ways that they're racialized in terms of, you know, when the Indian people were racialized as Black legally, and then like the different colored system and things like that. So one of the areas in which that became difficult for other students on the trip, not for me, but for other students, they had a hard time interacting with people who, I'm not entirely sure why this mattered to them, but it did. Interacting with people who labeled themselves as colored who would be Black here in the United States.
Interesting. Okay.
Which for me wasn't something that really mattered. I'm like, sir, just cook, like, give me my food. We're at this restaurant. Like, I don't care if you're...
How immersive was it? I mean, with the community?
No, we were there. Okay. Like, so we had host families.
Okay.
We had host families. We stayed with host families who represent a variety of backgrounds. So of the 2 host families I had, one of them represented Xhosa people in South Africa and Zulu. So we were like on the ground. We were there.
Yeah,
it's important to know it was in partnership with the university there. I cannot remember the name of it right now, but we were in Zululand. So we were like taking classes with Zulu students. We were on the ground. We were in their grocery stores. Like we weren't siloed away.
You weren't a tourist.
We were not like siloed away. We, you know, actually got to meet the Zulu prince who came over to the United States to receive his education. well, the Zulu king came over to the US. We also met the Zulu prince and, learned about their hierarchical leadership.
That's interesting experience.
Culture over there. But I bring that up because it's relevant to the extent that we knew prior to going that Blackness is racialized differently elsewhere in the world, but actually going and seeing it was an interesting experience. Also because most of the Black people who were on the trip were unilaterally Black in South Africa as well. So I say that to me, and we're people who are generations, Black American through and through here. Both of our parents are Black, phenotypically we look this way. So I wasn't someone who went over to South Africa and someone would look at me and think, oh, you're colored. They knew that I was Black. Now, for some of us, there were, confusions as to whether, we were told that we looked like tourists based on how we dressed and how we sounded. Of course, once we opened our mouths, it was clear that
you're not from here.
We weren't from there. But we did have a really good grasp on the language. So once we started speaking with them, they were surprised at how much we knew.
Okay.
But physically, we looked like we were out of place, which, again, we didn't expect to look like we were fitting in. again, I cannot emphasize enough how much of a diverse group it was. We had a white girl who was getting a PhD in linguistics. We had another white girl who's from the hood in Michigan. It was an interesting group of folks
that was an interesting group.
Who wouldn't typically be intermixing in that way over there.
Yes.
But it was an interesting 8 weeks, one for that reason, seeing the different ways that Blackness was racialized, but also just dealing with the ways that we were perceived and the ways that we were perceiving them and different biases that we had and trying to navigate things, for instance, such as you go over to a country like South Africa and the people here in the United States tell you hey, be careful. HIV runs rampant over there, which is statistically factually true, right? And then trying to make sure that you're not putting certain biases on people when you're interacting with them based on those things. But then talking to South Africans and they're like, no, it's dangerous over here. HIV runs rampant. You don't need to be out in the streets. You don't need to, it's difficult trying to figure that out. I'm talking to my host mom and she's like, no, you don't need to be going to this area because it's this way. But then it's in American. I'm trying not to put certain things onto the space and the people there based on what I have been taught and what I've been told. And then they're like, no, you absolutely do need to, because.
I see. So navigating that space, navigating this, how should I behave? Do you think you had to make the ultimate choice from your own experiences, or do you think you had to rely on directions from the locals or from your instructors? What was supreme in how you?
It was a good mix of all of the things. Our own personal discernment and judgment based on what we were learning while we were there. So the other thing that you realize is your education only takes you so far. Sure, I can learn on paper what this experience is like, but now I'm here and I'm interacting with these people. So on a daily basis, you're learning new things that inform, okay, tomorrow I'm going to do things this way in comparison to how it is that I did them before. But also we did take heed to what we were told, keeping in mind the very stereotypical, because we knew that we were American and we weren't your typical tourists who are coming to South Africa for a vacation.
Yeah, that would be an entirely different experience.
It's different because of who it is that we were interacting with and where we were on the ground. So once we started to get to know them, they had a different level of trust with us. But also there was always well, you're going to leave. You're still not from here. And you're still here, kind of sort of extracting, learning our language, learning our culture, dancing with us and singing our songs. But you're still going to go back. And you're not, you're not here. You're not really part of us in that way.
Yeah.
So there was a delicate balancing act that we had to play. But I will say that the people that we met, they loved us. We got along really well with them. We all loved our host families because they were, of course you would expect them to be welcoming because they signed up to host an American student. But also I think there's a mutual learning that was happening and a lot of breaking stereotypes and predetermined things and biases that they thought about us as well, which was interesting to learn about. The ways that they were undoing things that they had thought about Black American people specifically.
I'm curious, since you were prepped before this trip, and it's your first time being in South Africa, and you've got all this knowledge about the language, you have, basic grasp of the language, or maybe you spoke the language, were there things that were cultural shock to you from your experience? Because when people move to places, they always, have these narratives of, oh, I was shocked by this. Oh, this, I didn't know this was this way. Oh, I had this bias, this changed that.
Yeah.
Any of such experiences?
I can give two. So the first one is from a basic like American education standpoint. You learn South African history. I would argue that probably South African apartheid system is like the one, I guess, African thing that you for certain walk away from an American education having learned about compared to all of the other like countries.
Yes.
So any American here can talk about South Africa, at least on a base level, right? But then you go to college, you learn more maybe. Even having learned all of those things, we were not prepared for how ingrained Indian culture is in South Africa. Because that element and aspect is not taught. Geographically, it makes sense. India's right there. Yeah. We know that like Gandhi's relationship to South Africa, like we know of those things, but actually being on the ground and seeing it was like, oh, we didn't realize, one, that there was such a large population of Indian people who had migrated to South Africa. But secondly, we didn't realize how ingrained it was in the actual South African culture, particularly because we were learning about Zulu people.
Yeah.
So we get there and it's like Durban specifically is a huge like hub for that. So it just wasn't something we were expecting. So that's interesting to think about like migration and stuff, right? Like you get to a place and it's like, we're thinking, oh, South Africa is just all,
yeah, that's
the white Afrikaans people and then the, black people. And then it's like, no, there are actually a whole bunch of Indian people here too. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, about other countries when it comes to differences in development, how differently people are socialized when it comes to marriage and when it is that women are expected to like wed, have children and things like that. Those things. And then you get there and you realize I am an anomaly because I'm in my 20s. I have a college degree. I have no children and I'm not married. And so that was something that, as like a Black woman navigating that space, we were all in an uncomfortable awe about, because the way that we were, I guess, I don't want to say treated, the way that we were perceived based on that was different than how it is we were expected to be, because here that was our norm. So you have to remember, we are all college educated Black women in the United States, which isn't particularly
the expectation from like with your age. Okay.
So going over there, it was like, you're really in awe at the fact that I don't have any kids, that I'm not married, and that I already have a degree. Like when we went to, the Zulu King's Mansion, they were stunned at the fact that I said that I wanted to get a PhD.
Now you're going to be in school for the next couple.
They were like, and how old are you? At the time I was 22. And they were like, you're about to start a PhD program? I was like, in a year, yeah. And they were like, that's crazy. And I'm kind of just like, I'm like, I know what you want. And so what was interesting about that is,
did you react to those kind of conversations?
Well, for sure. We talked and we had real conversations about it. There was a mutual, I'm going to use almost like a mutual exoticizing, if you will, to the extent that there are things that we thought about them based on what it is that we learned, in which we exoticize like them. And then they were exoticizing us. And it's kind of like, it's not like that. That's not what this is. So there was a lot of learning and informing on both parts mutually that I think everyone benefited from. But we leaned into the discomfort of those conversations. Wasn't something we shied away from.
I have two personal questions, or maybe one. Let me even talk about what you mentioned earlier on about the huge Indian community that is embedded into even myself. I'm a Nigerian. I didn't learn all these things. I wasn't opportune to have this information. Even in when we were younger, the unfortunate thing is that our school education system, our school curriculums are adapted from the British.
Right.
That's kind of sad, but a lot of things are changing. A lot of things have changed in the last 20 years, 10 years. But I didn't learn about all these things. Growing up, I even got to learn about the Indian community in Uganda. And at a time when there were issues that they were expelled and those kind of things back in the military regimes of Idi Amin. And today, I think this conversation came up again with the New York election. That the New York mayor is Uganda.
who has a degree in Black Studies, I should point out. He has a degree in Black Studies. Just want to point that out there.
With parents too, the dad is a professor.
Those things matter, though.
Yeah,
like it informs
it informs how you actually view life, how you live life, how you live life. The philosophy that's guiding your life, even if you watch how he presents things and solutions, you see it's entirely different from the norm, from the regular. That we see in the capitalist society. And that brings me to your second shock. Did that encounter impact you in any way? Did it make you view your own need to be more like them, or far from that kind of norm, to maintain your norm?
Well, no, we knew what it was and what it wasn't. So we knew that we were students from the United States who were doing a foreign exchange language program. There was no we want to particularly be like them or try to particularly adapt their ways. It was more so for knowledge and education purposes. To learn about it and to know. And so in different ways, we might have left and decided we're going to change our relationship to technology when we go back, because there are certain things that we take for granted here in the United States at the universities that we're educated at. Keeping in mind, I'm not saying this as a monolithic experience. I just mean particular to what it is that we had lived and known. We're taking classes at Uni Zulu over there, and we can only do it during certain hours of the day because the power was shoddy.
Oh, okay.
And so it's the kind of thing where it was if a student, mind you, this is post, the global lockdown in 2020. It's 2023 now.
Yes.
So
okay.
We're used to, if a student gets sick, they can Zoom into class, right? We go over there. We're in rural KwaZulu-Natal, Richards Bay specifically. And it's actually, no, you can't do that here. If you get sick, you kind of just got to stay where it is that you're at for the day, because we don't have the internet capacity to do that. It's all right here in person, and that's how it's going to be. And so there were experiences like that where it was kind of okay, I'll keep that in mind when I go back and I'm navigating and interacting with these certain systems. But I wouldn't say there was something where it was kind of I will change how I interact with people or what it is that I do. We're all very humble people to begin with. So we didn't go over there thinking that it was going to be kind of oh, the Americans, da, da, da. If anything, we were more willing to learn their ways and be in it, not in an extractive, exploitative sense, but more so just I'm here for 8 weeks. So we're going to have to get to know each other because I'm in your face for this amount of time, and we're going to figure this thing out. And that's kind of going to be what it is. But overall, I have a very positive experience with it. They were more welcoming to us than I expected them to be.
Oh, that's a good one.
With it being my first time abroad and all that you hear about, I know everyone else hates Americans. I would hate us too.
You guys are loud.
I would hate us too.
You're as loud as Nigerians do.
The nuances that come with the Black American context are what change things. And so I think I went over there thinking oh, they're going to hate us and they're going to think that and this isn't me saying these things are negative. It's just me saying that I know the histories about how the U.S. was going over to Africa and during the COINTELPRO period, doing certain harmful things to make sure that you all thought negatively about us. Right. So I'm going over there thinking oh, they're going to think that we're all ghetto. They're going to think that we're all, either that we're ghetto or that we're super uppity and that we don't want to, actually get to know them, and that we have this hat on, and that we're sitting on this high horse or whatever. But I think in them actually getting to know us, they learned that we're not all the same either, which mattered. It was important. So that was pretty jarring to the extent that you actually go to a place and you realize how people view your people where you are, and appreciating the ability to say to them hey, some people are that way and there's nothing wrong with that way at all. It's actually beautiful that they're that way and I'm not, or that they're that way and I am that way. And now you can say that you've met a person who's exactly like it is that you were trained that we would be, I think just the nuance.